So once I have all my registering of my papers done, the next stage that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to actually print the linoleum. All right, I have all my white areas carved out for the first time through. I'm going to go over to the countertop next to the portfolio storage that's nice and covered with brown paper at this point. And I'm going to see that there's going to be 8 stations with these yellow pieces of plexiglass. At each station is going to be a brayer, which looks like kind of a mini paint roller that you would use on the walls for your house. There's going to be some palette knives like you guys used when we were doing the tempera painting. And then there's going to be a bin of inks that look like this. Okay, you're going to start with your lightest color first. You always print light to dark. So if you're using black, that's going to be your last color. And you're going to start again with your light colors. For most of you, if you have yellow, yellow is a pretty good default lightest color. If you don't have yellow but you have pink or you have light blue, those are going to be your lightest colors. And generally what I do if I'm trying to figure out if one color is darker than the next is I just use the Roy G. Biv method. Okay, so I'll print yellow first, orange, then red. So I go in the opposite direction for the first 3, and then I do green, then blue, and then violet last. Okay, so I take my print over to the printing station. I want everybody in class, because we're going to be fighting for resources a little bit, only one station should have a specific color. Okay, so if there are 3 people that are printing yellow, there should only be 1 yellow printing station. Okay, that'll allow for multiple colors to be printed at the same time and not have 3 different stations taken up just by the color yellow. You guys will have to share with each other, but when you're going through this process, there's some time where you come over to print, you roll your ink, then you go back to your desk, somebody else can fill in for your spot, and it just creates kind of a natural cycle until everybody gets the color printed that they need. Also, if you're the only person printing a specific color, you're going to be responsible for cleaning up that station as soon as you're finished with that area. Okay? So what I'm going to do actually, because you guys can mix colors, is I'm going to talk about how to do that, and I'm going to illustrate that with the yellow and the green ink, and I'm going to make a yellow-green color. Okay? So similar to painting, I'm going to mix the darker color, which is going to be green, into the lighter color. So I'm going to get my lighter color onto the plexiglass first. Okay, you can see these inks, sometimes this dry ink will come off of here. It's not a big deal, just try not to get that on the plexiglass, and if you do, just kind of scrape it off. Okay, so the palette knives are going to be used to take the ink out of the jar. I recommend always stirring the ink first. All right, and if we look at the ink, we'll see again, it's a much different consistency than the paint. Okay, I can hold this upside down, and it's not going to drip out of the can. Okay, so after I stir this up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some on my palette knife, and I'm just going to put it down onto the plexiglass. Okay, if you are mixing colors, all right, you are going to need at least 3 palette knives to do this. Okay, and I'll show you why. So 1 palette knife was for the yellow, and you can just put the palette knife back into the container of ink, that's fine. Now I'm going to get my green out here. All right, I'm going to stir this around. And remember back to our color wheel, if we're just trying to make kind of a light yellow-green color, I don't need a ton of green ink on there, okay? So I'm just going to put a little bit of green ink on there, all right? Now, if you are mixing a color, it is in your best interest to mix a pretty good amount of that color, okay? That way the color will remain consistent. If I don't make enough this first time through, then I'm going to have to try and match the color. And it doesn't have to be exact when you make the color again, but if you can make enough that it'll cover all your prints, all 5 prints the first time, it'll save you a little bit of time, and your prints will just look a little bit more consistent. So I have my 2 different colored inks in here, and notice I have my green palette knife in the green, I have my yellow palette knife still in the yellow. I take a clean, different palette knife here, and I'm going to just mix it around like this, okay? The reason I need a separate palette knife is now this is going to have yellow-green on here, okay? And this yellow-green ink, if I put it in here to scoop up more yellow, it's going to contaminate the yellow with the green. And it's no longer going to be a pure yellow like I would want it to be, and like the person in the next class is going to want it to be. So you need a third palette knife to do any type of mixing, all right? There are plenty of palette knives, so please use 3 when you're doing this process, okay? The only exception to that rule is I do have usually some pre-made pink color inks, light blue, and even some tan color inks that I usually just make in a jar because they are such popular colors, okay? All right, so if I'm mixing a color, this is a lot of ink, which is good because this will be enough to get me through my 5 prints, but I don't need to roll all of this ink now, so I'm just going to take some of this ink and I'm just going to transport it over to the side to save for later. All right. I'm going to take a little bit more here. And what I'm going to do with this palette knife is just set it off to the side. I can set it just right on the brown paper. I don't want to put it into the green ink or the yellow ink. I want to keep this completely separate. Okay, so now is the fun part, which is the rolling of the ink. Okay, so I have my brayer here. I have my ink on the table, and what I want to do is I'm going to start to roll the brayer in the ink. Now notice when I'm doing this, I'm rolling and I'm picking up, I'm rolling and I'm picking up. If I just do this back and forth, the brayer doesn't want to spin, okay, because the ink is going to stick it to, it's just going to slide around on the ink here. So what you have to do is pick it up, put it down, pick it up, put it down, so you're coating the entire brayer with ink, okay? And I want to do that going up and down and side to side. Notice, I'm just rolling a small square of ink. Okay? Also, listen to that nice sound. That Velcro sound, that lets me know that the ink is nice and tacky, it's sticky. It's going to stick to my print, it's going to stick to the paper. This is the noise I want to hear, that Velcro sound, okay? If you're having a tough time hearing that Velcro sound, and you're rolling it just does this, that means that there's probably too much ink right here. And what you might need to do is take a palette knife, scrape some of the ink off, move it to the side, so that you have less ink to spread. Okay, the other thing that I'm going to show you is this. Notice the ridges in here, okay? They're long. I know it's hard to see, but notice that they're long lines, okay? Looks like a river. What it should look like should almost be like little ripples, okay? So you're trying to create ripples, not rivers. That's a good way to remember that. If not, just listen for that sound, okay? So my brayer is nice and coated here with ink. The first time I put ink onto my print, the linoleum is kind of porous, so it's going to suck up some of the ink, and you're probably going to need to put more ink the first time on than you normally need to. Okay, so I'm just going to move my ink out of the way here. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the brayer with the ink on it, you're going to go to your print, and you're just going to roll the ink onto here. Okay? By the way, one thing that you should do before, and this is a mistake that I'm making here, before you even put ink the first time on the paper, you probably want to just go and clean off the linoleum and make sure that there's no little crumbs of linoleum that are still sticking onto there. Okay? So I'm going to apply this ink, and one of the things that people always do incorrectly is they never quite get enough ink down in the corners. So you want to make sure that you're going to get the ink down in those corners, okay? Now here's a good example of not enough ink, okay? This is gray. I can see my design through it. I can even see my design kind of peeking through here. I know that this is not enough ink that's going to print successfully, okay? It doesn't matter how much I continue to roll the brayer on here, the brayer is pretty much done with ink, okay? So what I need to do is I need to go back to my plexiglass, pick up some more of this ink, and then I continue to roll it here, okay? Again, because this is my first print, it's gonna take some more ink than it will in subsequent prints. So what I'm going to do is go back to my plexiglass plate, and I'm just going to scrape a little bit more ink from the corner right there. I do have to re-roll it until I hear that nice Velcro sound. All right, this will become a little easier as you go through this. It'll take a little bit longer your first time through because a lot of you are just learning how much ink do you actually need on the print to make it successful. But by the time you get to that last color, you guys will get all your prints done in like less than half an hour. Okay, so I come back and I continue to roll the ink onto my print. Okay, I'm doing this directly at the printing station. I don't want to do this on my desk. I'm showing you on a desk just for the sake of the demonstration. But that countertop is covered with brown paper for a reason. Okay, the ink is difficult to clean. We don't want to get ink on the desks if possible. It's probably going to be inevitable that we do. But this will just make our cleanup a lot easier. Okay, so I'm going to go over this one final time with some fresh ink. I want the ink to look nice and shiny and bright. If I can see my design through it, again, I know that there's not quite enough ink on there. And once it looks like I have enough ink coverage, I can kind of see it glistening on my print. I put my brayer down. If somebody else is using the same color, they'll jump in while I go to do the printing part. And then the line will just continue on, okay? So at this point, what I want you guys to do is go back to your desk and print at your desk.